Okay, so in this video we're looking at standard deviation and what it is and how to calculate it. So standard deviation tells us how close together data points are to each other. And as a rule, we have that 68% of data points are within one standard deviation of the mean. And we use the symbol sigma to stand for standard deviation. And of course we use the X bar to show mean. So the way that we figure out this range is we take our mean value and we subtract the standard deviation, and we've got 68% of data points. And on the other side, the upper end, we take our mean and we add the standard deviation. So we've got 68% of points within one standard deviation, 95% of points are within two. So I'm going to use my sigma to stand for standard deviation of the mean. And so we would just take this value, subtract another standard deviation, take this value, add another one to find that range of values. So we calculate standard deviation, and by calculating it, it tells us where the middle almost 70% of data points are and how far apart they are from each other, or how far apart they are from the mean more specifically. So there's a method to calculate standard deviation, but in general, we're going to use our calculator. And that's what the syllabus said as well, that when you're calculating this, you're expected to use your calculator. So we're going to look at our calculator for the standard deviation. So remember, we had put these lists in, and we had said that their range, the range of the first set of values was 3, and the second value was more spread out with 9 and 5. So let's look at the standard deviation for both of those. So the way that we find it with our calculator is that we take it. So here's our same data sets. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in the calculator first because we've already got it in our calculator. And in fact, this was our this is what our screen looked like for set B, and we can see my sigma value down here. Remember, I said sigma is what we use for standard deviation, and my sigma value for the first set we had is 2.87. Sorry, that's the second set. So 2.87 was my standard deviation. So what this means is that, let me put that down there, we're saying that 68% of those numbers are this distance away from the mean. So let's think about that. So we've got, set B, or class B. So I'm going to take the mean was 5.5. And so 5.5 minus that 2.87 all right, 2.63, and then 5.5 plus 2.87 is 8.37. So what we're saying is 68% of scores are between those two numbers, 2.63 and 8.37. So 68% of 10, so 0.68 times 10 is of course going to be 6.8. And so we're saying that about 6 scores are between these two numbers. Well, if I look here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 scores that are really between those. This rounds up to 3, this rounds to 8. So this matches what we had said. And this data is spread out. So my standard deviation was 2.87. This data is closer together. So think about our standard deviation. Do you think it's going to be bigger or smaller? Let's go and look. So I'm going to do stat, 1 var, and that first set of data was my list 1, no frequency. Now my standard deviation value, 1.36. So 1.36. So what we're saying here is this set of data points are closer to the mean. So my mean was 5.5. So class A also had a mean of 5.5. So 68% of its scores are between. So we need to do 5.5 minus 1 standard deviation. 5.5 minus 1.36 is 4.14, and 5.5 plus 1.36, 6.86. This would round to 7, this would round to 4. We actually see 100% of our points are within 1 standard deviation. So that tells us that this data is really close together. All right, so that's using our calculator to calculate standard deviation. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to do it by hand.